Alright, the CSS positioning schemes allow you to position an element in a precise location on the web page, and the positioning properties allow you to control where and how you want those elements to be positioned. Now, using these boxes here, I am going to explain and show you how the various positioning schemes work. So if you're new here, please consider subscribing for more updates. Now there is something called normal document flow, and this is basically how each element takes up space and how other elements position themselves accordingly. For example, if I'm to put another div here, you will notice that it will come right after this last one. Now that's more like the normal document flow. Now the fixed position element has three main characteristics, and one is that it takes the document out of the normal document flow. That's one. Two is that it locks this element onto the screen. That is, as you scroll up and down, the element remains on screen. And lastly, it is relative only to the HTML document itself. So you can see that this box has been removed from the normal document flow, and as I scroll up and down, you will notice that it is locked to the screen, and lastly it is relative to the HTML document itself. Now, one of the uses of the fixed positioning is sometimes when you go to a website, you will notice that the navigation bar is fixed, and as you scroll up and down, it remains on screen. That's one of the uses of the fixed positioning. Now the second one is the static positioning. Now the static positioning is the default positioning of your browser. Now what I mean is, when I inspect this element here, you will notice that the position there would be static. Now that is the default position of elements. Now the static position does not take any positioning property. You cannot set it to left, right, top or bottom. Now next up is the absolute positioning. Now the absolute positioning is kind of similar to the fixed positioning in that it removes the element from the normal document flow. But unlike the fixed positioning, it is relative to its ancestor or its relative ancestor. Otherwise, it is relative to the HTML document itself. So what I mean is, when I save and go back to my browser and reload, you'll notice that this box has left the normal document flow. That's one. Secondly, it is relative to the HTML document itself. This is because there is no positioned ancestor. So when I go back to my code and position my container to be the ancestor by giving it a position of relative, when I go back, it's going to be positioned relative to the container. Now when I reload this page, you will notice that it has been positioned relative to the container because I gave the container made the container the closest positioned ancestor. Now one of the uses of this positioning scheme is, sometimes when you go to a web page, you notice that there is a text or a search box or an icon at the far top corner of the navigation bar. That's one of the uses of the absolute positioning. Now the next one is the relative positioning. Now the relative positioning is different from the absolute and the fixed in that it does not remove the element from the normal document flow. Now without giving it any positioning properties, when I go back to my page and reload, you would notice that nothing changes. And when I give it some properties like set my top to 30 pixels, when I go back and reload, you would notice that it has moved but still in the normal document flow. You can see it moved down, but it still remains in the normal document flow. Now one of the uses of the relative position is what I showed you before. and that is to position an ancestor the absolute position element. Now the next one is the sticky positioning. Now the sticky position is more like a combination of the relative positioning and the fixed positioning.